Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Burlett, and I chose to talk about the Instructional Design Standard for Quality Online Teaching. This is technically an optional standard for the online teaching because it goes along a little bit better with the other set of standards for quality online courses. But I do feel like actually designing instruction um, regardless of format, is absolutely essential for quality teaching, period. Um, so the instructional design standard states that the teacher curates and creates instructional materials, tools, strategies, and resources to engage all learners and ensure achievement of academic goals. I mean, again, like most of these standards are going to be essential for teaching, regardless of it being online or in person. The thing that makes this, I think, pretty strictly online based is that it talks about the use of technology in the design, specifically H1, where we're talking about technology that efficiently engages learners. The standard says that the teacher uses technology to increase learner engagement. This is basically the use of LMS or online tools that encourage collaboration, the facilitation type of teaching that is really being pushed right now, and small group projects. So the technology that you can use should maybe be in the form of a choice board or a menu, or that's personally how I take this standard, is that it's increasing student choice and using technology to effectively assess um, assess the learning. So I typically use like a presentation, like a Google slide for choice boards, or I provide a menu where a student can choose how they assess, like what assessment they choose, and then let them choose the technology that they want to use or they're most interested in using. And then also designing projects that encourage creativity and critical thinking, strictly in online formats. And then same thing with projects that maybe require research, because we all know that research is pretty much done online nowadays. So getting students to consume or use diverse types of media to present to for assessments, things like that. H2 is all about using formative approaches. I mean, it's about just getting data from the students throughout the unit instead of that unit test where we understand whether they learned it or didn't, using these formative assessments, online formative assessments. Um, so, this standard is all about using exit tickets or quizzes. Like you can use Canvas quizzes or Google Forms to gauge mastery before a summative, and then using that formative to inform future choices. But I think what makes this specifically for online courses is that a teacher can use a tracker. So I used to use Mastery Connect, which was really helpful. You would, determine your categories. So if a student made from a 0 to a 50, they might have been beginner, 50 to a 70, or something like developing. You can totally create your own categories or whatever, your school encourages you to, whatever your school encourages you to do. But using that tracker online to gauge instruction and gauge growth. And then I also believe that this is all about reflective practice. If you have a ton of kids after you've loaded your assessment into your tracker that aren't getting the lesson, then, that's going to have to be like, what did I do? How can I have made this assignment better? Was there some kind of flaw? It's all about doing that reflective practice and reteaching as necessary, and then seeking feedback from students or colleagues. I always ask my student after a big project, like, what did you like about this project? What did you not like about this project? And then kind of adjusting instruction based on that. This is all about incorporating diverse media and making sure that this media represents the diversity of our classes. So Teaching in Houston has really forced me to take a look at the material that I teach and making sure that my students can see themselves reflected in this material. I teach British literature, which is very, very white and very, very male. So I've been, thinking of ways about how to diversify that in order to engage in that culturally responsive pedagogy. I want my students who are of, African American descent, or my students who are of Asian descent, to be able to see themselves represented in this literature. Students from all different backgrounds. We are doing a month on female writers, but I also feel like a lot of the women in my class, the students that I teach, really want to read more by female authors. So it's about making sure that the things that you do choose, um, they will speak to all students in classes. And I feel like in an English class, which is what I teach, it's a little bit easier to choose that kind of media. For someone in a science or a math class, if you're going to choose media, if you're going to incorporate a video, like maybe try to find videos where it's not just, one kind of demographic with the people who are presenting this information, and, doing your best to find creators who are of all different backgrounds and demographics. And then this is also about selecting media. Like, you can do a book, but you can also do like YouTube videos or TED Talks, or um, audio recordings, looking at graphs, looking at charts, including media from, you know, media that the students can create, not just asking them to do PowerPoint presentations, but maybe taking a look at other types of resources online, Canva, making infographics, stuff like that. And then not shying away from those very difficult discussions about criticism of media and privilege. Right now we're reading Pride and Prejudice, and Jane Austen is wonderful. I love her, but there are a lot of blind spots in her writing, and I do encourage those discussions with my students. And then we have H4. This is about incorporating subject-specific and developmentally appropriate. I'm not going to give my seniors, Dr. Seuss. That's more of a radical example, but, adding that engaging content and making sure that it's rigorous. And right now, my students, this year has been a little difficult trying to get students back into the swing of things. I feel like I could definitely up the rigor in my class. But it's also about assessing where your students are at in any given year. If I've taught for a couple years now, there are some classes that are particularly low that I might not choose to give them like a really difficult research project all outside of class. Like, that might be an in-class decision, and trying to pare it back a little bit, to make sure that they can actually complete it while also pushing them. Like asking seniors in high school to write a literary analysis essay instead of maybe giving a comparing and contrasting paragraph that might, talk about something like The Giver. And then making sure students are exposed to relevant literature and media. I mean, not to call people out, but I do have colleagues that use like 20-year-old references, and students aren't really going to understand that. So I incorporate TikTok, I incorporate social media sometimes in my teaching. I talk about relevant things to their lives that are going to make sense to them to contextualize the information. H5 is all about just aligning your course content with course objectives. So we're in Texas, it's the TEKS. If you're not in Texas, it might be Common Core, it might be whatever state standards. But, if you're looking at identifying standards, I typically like to find the standards that I want to hit most, the critical ones. The rest of them, great if I hit them, but identifying those critical standards that you definitely want your students to know how to do when they leave your class. And then, of course, engaging in backward design. So you begin with the assessment, you begin with the end goals in mind, and then that should inform your instruction as you move backward and start, with the everyday lesson planning. And then, of course, updating your content to reflect current best practices. So, and keeping up to date on the research. And then age 6, laying out that course design thoughtfully, and then again, identifying those crucial skills and standards that you could keep hitting throughout the course. So for me, I might choose the standard that talks about poetry. I mean, we read a lot of poetry in my class. I know we're going to hit that standard over and over again. I know I'm going to keep assessing it. So I'm going to choose that as a crucial skill. And then these, again, should reappear throughout the course. I mean, a student is not necessarily going to remember if you talked about irony once in October, but if you talked about it in October and November and January and March, then that student is more likely to understand irony when they leave. And then, of course, those frequent formative assessments and going back to reteach as necessary. So some of the best resources that I found, again, like I love online teaching. I grew up knowing how to navigate the internet. So this comes easily to me. But I think that the online lesson design starts with just good curriculum design practices, being able to design curriculum offline and then being able to put it online. And, being able to put it online is it's been a bit of trial and error, but it's all about thinking about it from the student's perspective. The online teaching survival guide is really good for actually giving practical resources, but Tools for Thought and Teaching English by Design are two of the books that I have used almost every single day in my class. Tools for Thought is really easily recreatable on Google Docs. These are graphic organizers. And then Teaching English by Design is all about creating curriculum on that macro scale. It is specifically about English, but I feel like it can absolutely be easily adaptable to any humanities course. If you don't teach a humanities course, I still think that his advice on how to do curriculum on a macro scale is still relevant. And then I use Padlet and Canva for my online resources for my kids. I get my kids to upload responses on Padlet, which is a free website. It's like an interactive wall. So I use this to facilitate brief discussions. And I have my students read other posts. And then Canva is really great because it's not just about doing presentations. A student can be more creative with the way that they choose to present their material, present their assessment. They can choose an infographic, a poster, and they're gorgeous templates and they're free. So I really like those two resources and those 3 books. But yeah, that's pretty much instructional design. Again, I think it's more about actually having those good curriculum design skills first, and then that online part, choosing those resources to best present this is, I think it's almost secondary, but it's still very important, but secondary. But anyway, well, thank you guys so much for listening. And let me know if you have any questions, but hope you guys have a wonderful week. And yeah, thank you so much.